Hey there, welcome to Thoughtful Thursday. I'm your host, Mae Renfroe, and I think it's going to be a wonderful episode today. As always, I'm excited the guests that I have on to share with me some really great stuff. And today I have Cheryl Parker is sharing with us, and she has a journey of grief. Similar to my last two guests on Thursdays too were fellow moms of child loss like myself, and Cheryl is again two daughter and then her husband to suicide. She's has navigated this dark time in her life, and she's found healing and light. And so I'm excited to share for her to share that with us. And so whatever you're going through, too, I'm sure you can relate. So Cheryl, just welcome you and today, and I am sorry, for your loss that we have that in common. But I am grateful that you have found that hope and that healing, like I have, and my other guests previously. So, could you kind of introduce yourself more to us, Cheryl, and then take us into your story and what all you would like to share today?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I'm Cheryl Parker, and I went through my grief journey. Started, I guess, about 25 years ago when my 8-year-old daughter Rachel died. And it was just a common flu bug that our family was hit with. And my son Sean, who was 6 at the time, got it first. And he was down and out for a week. And then I got it, and I was off work for a couple days. And then Rachel got it. And after a week, Rachel just didn't seem to be recovering from it. It was just really hanging around. And I guess it was the following week. I thought I've got to get back to work. So my mom took her for the day for me, so that I could return to work. But when I got home, mom said that her stomach was really hard and that that was not normal. So I took her to the hospital to get her checked out, and they noticed that her platelets were getting low. And they told me that it was a great big long word. ITP is the short form for it. But it's when your antibodies attack the platelets instead of the virus. And so what happens is your platelets get really low, then they start to multiply and you recover, and you just have to monitor your platelets probably for the rest of your life. So
Mhm.
it can be dangerous if they get to a really low level. So they were just monitoring her platelets and kept her in overnight. But in the morning, they noticed that her platelets were getting down to a dangerous level. So they ended up transferring us to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And I'm from Canada. And so they were, again, monitoring her platelets. And apparently, there's not much you do with this condition. You just monitor because they recover. Less than 1% chance you can get a spontaneous bleed, and that can be in any of your organs, and that too is recoverable. So, about 10 o'clock at night that night, Rachel sat up and her eyes were all glossed over and she was agitated, and it seemed like she couldn't move the one side of her body. And it actually struck me like, oh my gosh, she's had a stroke. And so the doctors came running, and they called a neurological doctor. They wanted to do an MRI on her brain.
Mhm.
So it turned out, because they thought either the flu has gone to her brain or she has a bleed in her brain. And so they did a scan and they realized that she had a brain bleed, but they couldn't
Mhm.
operate because her platelets were so low. So they were pumping her
Mhm.
full of platelets to get her to a level where they could at least operate. And the plan was they were going to remove the front left lobe of her brain to release the pressure. So that was traumatic, and they had to prepare me for what Rachel was going to be like after this operation, because without your
Mhm.
front left lobe, there's a lot of
Yeah.
personality and motivation and a lot of things that go along with the front left lobe.
Mhm.
So they were preparing me for that. And so they went in, they did the surgery, and after a couple of hours, they realized that her brain was so swollen that she was pronounced brain dead.
Mhm.
And so I was like, back up the bus. My kid's got the
Mhm.
flu. Like,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to die from the flu, and you're not supposed to die from
Yeah.
this ITP condition. So
Yeah.
it was a very, very rare,
Oh.
rare situation that she was in. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, I was obviously brought to my knees. My 6-year-old son was climbing up on the table on top of Rachel and saying, who's going to walk me to school? And in my mind, I was thinking, like, this can't be real. Like, she's got a dance recital next week, and Christmas is in 3 weeks, and like, she
Wow.
has to grow
Mhm.
up, and she has to,
Yeah.
go to school and get married and to have a
Mhm.
life. And so,
Wow.
the
Wow.
doctor had asked me if I had considered organ donation, and I said no, but she had. And he said, "She
Oh,
had?"
okay.
And I
Huh.
said, "Yeah." Like, I mean, like 5 weeks
Wow.
ago, I was reading a newspaper where a little boy had just undergone a double lung transplant.
Mhm.
And Rachel had
Mhm.
been asking me, like, why does he look happy? He's got all these wires hooked
Mhm.
up to him and he's in a hospital. And so I explained to her that he got new lungs, and so that's why he's happy. And he was sitting on the hospital bed, and his arms, extended in victory. And
Mhm.
and
Oh, wow.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so she said, "Well, where do you get new lungs?" And I said, "Well, somebody died, and they gave permission for him to get their lungs." And so she went back to playing, and then about 5 minutes later, she pops her head up and she said, "Well, when I die, I want to give my organs so I can save kids."
Mhm.
So little did I know, 5 weeks later, I would be
Wow.
drawing on that conversation. So when the doctor said,
Wow.
"Have you considered organ donation?" I said, "No,"
Yeah.
but she had. And so we were able to donate her heart, which went into a 7-year-old little girl, Mary. And her lungs were flown down to the
Oh.
States and transplanted into a 13-year-old girl who had already had a lung and a heart transplant. So this
Yeah.
was her second lung transplant. One of her
Oh.
corneas gave sight to a baby who was blinded at birth, and another cornea gave sight to a toddler who was blinded in surgery. So the rest of the
Oh,
organs
wow.
weren't viable, but
Yeah.
because at the time Mike Harris and Don Cherry were putting together the Trillium Gift of Life organization, and they were advocating for people to express their wishes rather than just signing
Yeah.
their license, because the family's
Yeah.
really the one that makes the decision.
Mhm.
So Rachel became a bit of a poster child because she had expressed her wishes, and it was a pretty powerful story. So
Mhm.
I, in the acute stages and overwhelm of my grief, became a public speaker for organ donation. And I
Oh,
even
wow.
became, yeah,
Yeah.
I became the national spokesperson for organ donation actually the next year, and did a lot of public speaking. And I mean, I would park my grief at the door. I would go to speak, and then I'd go home and like just like flat out for 3 days crying and, can't move. Um, but for some reason, I could powerfully share that story.
Yeah.
And I just like, I know that it was bigger than me. And I wanted it to be bigger than me. I didn't want to just be this woman that was sad because she lost her daughter. I didn't want that to be my life.
Yeah.
I needed this to be bigger than me. And so I just felt like I was lifted, and I was given this strength and this ability to share this powerfully. And I remember like dropping to my knees and saying to God that it's like, you have to, if I'm going to stick around, this has to be about more than me paying the bills and raising my son, or else just take
Mhm.
me. And so he did. He delivered, and he not only delivered me from, my walk and um, my journey through grief,
Mhm.
because I certainly don't feel like I had the strength to do it on my own. I definitely felt carried, and never have I understood that poem of footprints more than when I went through my
Oh,
grief
okay.
journey,
Yeah.
because I truly, truly felt like I was carried. Like, there's no way I walked that path by myself. I just
Oh,
know I didn't. Um,
yeah.
and so when I was doing all
Wow.
that public speaking, people would line up afterwards to talk to me, to share their
Yeah.
stories. And
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, like, being able to share a tragedy powerfully and inspire people,
Mhm.
that was just the ultimate to me. And when I saw all these people that were hurting, and that my by me sharing my story had others open up and actually line
Mhm.
up to speak to me, I just thought, oh my gosh, I have to do something with this grief. Like, it can't just be about God getting me through it. It's like, and, and like I said, I wanted it to be bigger than me. So I ended up starting to help other people. Like, Sick Kids Hospital would have people call me because they saw how I had reacted and how Sean had reacted with Rachel, and were just so inspired by the whole story that they thought that I would be a good person to talk to people when they were really hurting.
Mhm.
So they were, sending
Mm.
people to me to talk to. And I thought, well,
Oh,
once I go through this grief journey,
yeah,
because I knew I wasn't really in a position to help anyone. I was like barely surviving myself. But I
yeah.
thought, once I get through this, I do want to help others because there are so many hurting people out there. And I just thought, it's not just me that has learned. Like, let me back up. One of the biggest lessons that I learned when Rachel died was that I wasn't just grieving Rachel. I was
Mhm.
grieving the
Mm.
future, the woulda, coulda, shouldas.
Oh, okay.
The
Yeah,
things
all
that
those things.
the
Yeah.
things that like I would experience with her, like,
Mhm.
I'll never be able to see her wedding. I'll never be able to see her graduate. I'll never be able to see these other things. And not only like my own stuff, but it's like I'm not Rachel's mom anymore. And what does that mean? That's a loss. Now I've
Mm.
lost a circle of friends that,
Mhm.
whose daughters, Rachel used to play with. And I had lost my self-esteem. I ended up losing my job, like, by choice. I left my corporate job because I just couldn't cope. But, and then lost the financial status, and loss of trust in the universe, and loss of safety. Like, there were
Yeah,
just so many other
yeah,
losses that came
yeah.
with that one death. And so when I was learning that, and then when I was going through my healing process, and realizing that I had all kinds of other grief that had been unacknowledged, unresolved, unexpressed. Like, I had 3 miscarriages that didn't even have on my radar that were a loss. And,
Yeah.
just like looking at my life from the perspective of loss, it's like, gosh, I've had so much loss. So when
Yeah.
Rachel died, it was like this big pot of losses that I was trying to work through. And so it was a lengthy, lengthy process for me. I remember it was 4 years before I put my head up and said, I think I'm going to survive this. And, my friend said, well, we always knew you would. And I said, I didn't. I did
Yeah.
not. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
seem like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would. It
Yeah.
was very dark times, and it was a slugfest. It was like walking through a swamp. And I mean, I had amazing community around me, thank goodness. But, I just wanted to go into my room and close the door and go to sleep and never wake up. Like, it was
Yeah.
it was a very, very difficult time. It's like I just didn't know who I was without my daughter. And,
Mhm.
people will say, well, you have Sean to think about. It's like, Sean is Sean. Sean is not Rachel. It's
Mhm.
like, you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
lose one child and have the other child make up for it. Like, it's
Mhm.
like, if you lose a leg, oh well, you got another one. Like, no, it doesn't work
Mhm.
like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was very
Yeah, for sure.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was a single mom at the time. I had left my husband 5 years before that. And then 5 years, no, what was it? 10 years later, my former husband died by suicide. He never really did
Mm.
find his footing after Rachel died, and unfortunately,
Oh,
his
okay.
coping
Okay.
strategy was alcohol. So he turned to alcohol in his darkness, and yeah, it got the better of him, and he ended up taking his own life. So by then, Sean was 16. So that was a tough go. That was a tough go because then Sean kind of went off the rails. Now he's lost
Mhm.
half his family. And he
Mhm.
went from thriving in high school, on Students Council and the Global Leadership Program, playing in the band, acting in the drama club, like very well liked, getting good grades, and then just, totally went off the rails. So that was a really rough time too, because he didn't he didn't grieve the same with his father that he did with his sister. Because when he
Mhm.
was 6, and then shortly after he turned 7, he was a very artistic child. So he would sit down on the piano and play music, and he would write songs about her, and he would do plays about her, and yeah, like just pictures and stories and music, and so it all got expressed,
Yeah.
through play.
Yeah.
And then when he was 16, although he was acting still, um, he turned to other things like alcohol and smoking weed, and
Mhm.
I mean, I know kids at that age experiment with that stuff, but I was worried that this was going to become his coping strategy. And so
Yeah.
it was very difficult to watch him, skip school, and his grades fell, and yeah, having to love him through that. And at the time, it was hard for me too, because I had started working with clients, and had been for years, but knowing that I couldn't help my son, I thought, who am I to be helping anybody else? So I kind of
Mhm.
hung up my, put my shingle away
Oh,
for a little while, and didn't
yeah.
work with clients anymore, because I lost my confidence. I thought, my gosh, I can't even help my own son. But,
Yeah.
Sean worked through that, and ended up graduating, and, I remember he went back for a victory lap, and all his teachers and guidance counselors and everything said, "You know what, Cheryl, just let him blow off some steam. Let him come back for a victory lap. We'll get him through this." And they did,
Mhm.
and I remember when he walked across the stage, and the vice principal handed him the certificate, and she gave him a big hug, and they just stood there and embraced, and it was just such a
Mhm.
proud moment for everyone. I was proud, and
Mhm.
Sean was proud of him, like, accomplishing
Mhm.
that, and she had
Mhm.
supported him through that rough
Yeah.
time. And so, yeah,
Wow.
we don't do this alone, that's for sure. And I really felt like God put the right people in
Yeah.
mine and Sean's path through the whole process. Because
Yeah.
there were friends that I lost through that, because they couldn't handle it,
Mhm.
and yet
Mhm.
there was amazing people that showed up that hadn't been my
Mhm.
friends. And I was in this circle of friends, and I remember looking around the table thinking, these are the closest people to me. These are the people that are getting me through this grief process, and none of them knew Rachel. Like, it was amazing. Like, God just
Hey.
put all those
Oh,
women in
wow.
my path.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and not that
Oh,
some didn't stay around that knew Rachel, but yeah, it was amazing to watch it all unfold, and see what God can do with a tragedy, for sure.
yeah. Wow, that is a lot to go through. I'm just
Yeah.
oh my goodness, to go through all of that, and, and then the your husband with the suicide, and then for your son, I'm like, "Oh, no," like, wondering where how that ended up, but it sounds like stay process okay and stay strong, and especially in the school where you're saying that he had a lot of support, a lot of people rooting
Yeah.
for him, sounds
Yeah.
like, so that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lot to go through. I really love that conversation that you had with her about the donor, uh, donating, that is something that is really amazing. Wow.
Yeah. When at Rachel's funeral, a guy that played hockey with my brother was at the funeral, because of being friends with my brother. I didn't know this guy. And when he found out about the organ donation, he asked my brother if I would consider telling her story. And so my brother Wayne asked me, and I said, no. I said, my daughter died. It's not a news story. And then a couple days later, I thought, wait a minute. Rachel made her decision about organ donation by reading that story in the newspaper. So I called Wayne, and I
Oh,
said, you know what? Tell
yeah.
Kevin I will do that story, because
Oh,
I felt compelled that I needed to pay it forward.
Yeah.
So it felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to do it, but it felt like the right thing to do. And Kevin came
Yeah.
over and he was great and he interviewed me and his story, well, our story, ended up on the front page of the Toronto newspaper with a
Oh,
two-page
wow.
spread on page 4 and
Yeah.
5. And he won an
Wow.
award for that story.
Yeah.
And his editor submitted the story to the Chicken Soup for the Soul people.
Yeah.
And it was the
Oh,
number
okay.
one picked story for Chicken Soup for the Parent's Soul. And it's her stories on
Oh,
page
wow.
287 in that book.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
again, like
amazing.
so many different
Yeah.
serendipity things that came out of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
Isn't
did.
that neat? It's just,
She became quite the poster child for organ donation,
yeah.
and then as a
Yeah.
result, we ended up meeting the girl that got Rachel's heart,
Oh,
and
okay. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and I mean, there's laws against it, and
Oh,
we I was
yeah.
communicating with her through the Multiple Organ Transplant Association back then. It was called the MORE program. And I could
Yeah.
write a letter and they would read it and then they would forward it on to the family. And then they would, they would could converse as well, and they were. So I was
Mhm.
getting letters from Mary, and in an effort to be able to like quicken the communication and not take 6 months for that whole process to happen,
Mhm.
I my girlfriend who lived in London, who ended up meeting Mary at a beaver event.
Hmm.
She saw a
Hmm.
newspaper clipping of the little girl, so I got her last name,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I ended up phoning and directory assistance at the time, and I found the
Mhm.
family, and they had been following Rachel's story because there was
Okay.
a little write up in a church magazine about her. And so
Yeah.
they had seen that. And so they kind of put the dates together and figured this must be the girl that gave
Okay.
Mary
Yeah.
her heart.
Yeah.
So our families end up meeting. And so that was 23 years ago, because it was about 2 years after Rachel died that we met.
Okay. Yeah.
And we are
Uh-huh.
still best of friends. I just spent the weekend at their house this past weekend. Like, we're still best of friends, and Sean has a wonderful relationship with the kids, and him and
Yeah.
Mary had a special bond. Unfortunately, another 2 years later, so 4 years, she had Rachel's heart, but she had a lot of complications. It's almost like she got the heart too late, because she was already so sick.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so she had a rough go for 4 years with the heart, and she ended up dying. But I am so glad that we got to be in relationship with her for a couple of years before she passed away.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's neat. It's amazing. And that
Yeah.
she had, that life that much longer because of your
Yeah.
daughter's
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
Wow, all of those little things. That must have really helped your healing in your grief, though you said it was really hard. So do you feel like that really, really helped you?
Absolutely. I think for me, because it, like, knowing that she saved lives, that's a pretty big deal, right? And so
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
hang on to the gratitude and you can hold on to the pride that you have, and so that's another emotion rather than guilt, sad, depressed, like
yeah,
there's all the emotions to
yeah,
feel,
yeah,
and I felt them all. But
yeah,
gratitude is a powerful one, and being proud is a powerful one. So it was nice to be able to tap into those emotions while I was going through the rough time, and being able to hang on to that for sure.
yeah, that would have helped. Yeah, I know that in my own grief journey and reading other people's books and stories, they said finding things to be thankful for was really powerful, and I found little things in our story of losing our son as well. And so you're still grieving, you're still hurting and all,
Yeah,
but just finding these little things to be thankful for just really does help your heart and to give
absolutely.
you, that hope. And maybe that you had a lot of other like losses that I think that'd be called secondary losses, right? So, and other
Yes.
things that
Yeah.
you realize, yeah, you'll no longer get to experience and do because you don't have your daughter. So those losses too, but still, finding those other things to be thankful for must have helped. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, for sure.
wow,
Yeah.
wow. And then your your husband's loss. Now that must have been almost a whole different, because was there a little anger maybe to him attached to when you're grieving, and then like, how could you do this to our son? You know what like
Yes.
that must be tough.
Initially, that is where I went. Like, it's like, why could you not get your act together and be the
Yeah,
father that he needed you to
yeah,
be? I was so spitting angry. But I moved through anger fairly quickly, actually, because I didn't have a lot of leftover anguish with my former husband. Like, we had worked through a lot of stuff. So, um, I could be friendly with him in public. He could call, we could be civil. If he went to the kids' activities and stuff, he would sit
mhm,
with me and, like, for the kids' sake, right? Like, I didn't want it to be a battleground kind of thing.
mhm,
So, I just tried to keep our differences separate from the kids, and we did well at that, because I remember my kids saying, like, you and dad seem to get along well, why don't you get back together? And
mhm,
it's like, well, because it's more complicated than that. But
mhm.
yeah, for sure I was angry at first, and what that was going to do to Sean. Like, he's
Yeah,
not like, he's gone through enough. Like, he's still dealing with
yeah,
the fact that he's lost his sister. It doesn't matter that it's 10 years later, you're never not dealing with it, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, I was angry. But I also, with the situation of suicide, I truly believe that it's not that they want to die. They just don't know how to live with the pain anymore. So,
Mhm,
like, I could definitely have compassion for him, and I just felt like that's where I needed to live in order for me to be able to be there for Sean. Even though he went off the
mhm,
rails and he was doing what he was doing, I needed to have my footing on the ground so that he had somebody stable to um,
yeah,
vent to, or to
uh-huh,
process his stuff with. um, so yeah, there wasn't a lot of old residue, and I ended up hosting a funeral service for him, a memorial service for him. I ended up, taking charge of the burial and everything, because even though we had been divorced for, gosh, I don't even, I'd have to do the math. But
mhm,
for a long time, like 15 years. But his family weren't really stepping up to do that stuff. So
mhm,
the ex-wife ended up doing it, because I felt like Sean deserved to have some kind of, send off, some kind of goodbye for his father. So I hosted a memorial service and emceed it, and was able to stand in love and forgiveness and be a role model for Sean at that time. So I was pretty proud of being able to do that, and just also be like a demonstration of how, if you work through your grief, because divorce
yeah.
is grief, if you work through it, you can land in love and forgiveness, and you don't have to
Wow.
live in that anger place, that which tears our hearts up. Like,
Mhm,
it's just
mhm.
so destructive.
Yeah, yeah, very. It's not gonna help us, at all. So
No.
why, why go there? But I mean, it can't. It's, I guess, a natural thing that can come natural
Yeah,
to
yeah, not to
first grief
ignore it. You
loss,
gotta,
kind of. But
yeah, yeah,
mhm,
you gotta go through that. You gotta feel that. You gotta
mhm,
express it, but not live there. Yeah,
mhm. Yeah, not let it uh, rule over or destroy your life.
yeah,
Now, as you
because it
move
will.
forward. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was thinking of a Bible verse. John 10:10, how it says, Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus just came to give us life and life abundant. So I feel like the life he came to give us is one of hope and of peace and of joy, where it's quite the contrary in the other. And Satan will try to steal that, and just by plaguing our mind with things that it's not, and if it's not helpful or more self-focused, yeah, centered. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, that's good. So through all of this, you have been helping the women already, right, with their grief, all up until the time you lost your husband and all to suicide. And then did that kind of change how that looked, the picture of that? Now, obviously, you can relate to more women, or more women
It,
can relate to your story. And
yeah. Unfortunately, I remember,
yeah,
I remember doing a course on grief, and when I was learning how to facilitate the workshops, and they get you to do this graph on all your losses, and looking
hmm,
at my whole life, it's like, oh my gosh, like, in the old adage, like, where have you spent 10,000 hours to master? It was like, oh,
hmm.
I've mastered loss because I've spent
Okay,
10,000 hours. I thought,
okay,
that's
yeah,
not good news, Cheryl. Like,
yeah,
but
yeah,
then I realized that it's not actually, that's not what I've mastered. I've actually mastered being able to recreate myself in the face of loss. Like, that
yeah,
is where I
yeah.
can be inspired. So, although I've had a lot of loss and I've had a lot of tragedy, it's like it just gives me more material to work
Hmm,
through in my life, and then
hmm,
to then share with others. And I really feel like that's the purpose for me.
hmm.
So, not that I wish tragedy, but it's like I'm constantly being tested for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And all of this has just really gave you a lot of more insight or resources to be able to help others now,
Yeah.
right? And what they're going through.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
Well,
So
I
you
was
do.
I was I was
I'm
sent to
sorry.
the book of Job a lot of times.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
It was like, I'm sick of hearing a Job.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He's been through a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's it. Good though. How you're just able to stay strong and keep your footing, or you obviously were grounded in Jesus, and so that is what has helped
Yeah,
change
I
everything.
I don't even know how people would go through this without their faith. Like, as soon as it happened, I was spitting mad at God, I'll tell you. Like, I was mad. But I
Mm-hmm.
know that God knows my heart, and I know that God could handle my anger. And I didn't hold back when I was talking to him about how angry I was, because I knew he knew. And 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 I know because he watched his son die too. So he
Hmm.
knows the pain. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
hold back on my anger. And and I but I do remember, like, telling him that he's got some explaining to do when I get up there, because I'm gonna want
Okay.
some answers.
Yeah.
But I had to learn that he would guide me, and he would give me the
Yeah.
answers as I went. So it's like, no, it's still my judgment day when I get there. It's not his.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
You know,
But
and he did.
even though I was angry, I kept talking to him because I knew that I needed him. I needed him every minute, every breath, every step I
Mhm.
took. I could not do it without him. Like, so I just constantly like, get me through the next hour. Please get me through the next hour. Get me through the next 10 minutes. Get me through this talk. And
Yeah.
and he did, time and time and time and time and time again. Even though it felt dark and it felt like I was alone. I knew I wasn't alone. I
Yeah.
knew that in my heart of hearts, but
Oh, wow.
it felt like I was in the struggle of my life.
Yeah.
And it was the struggle of my life. And yeah, I know that it carried me through, and I can't even imagine what shape I would have been in if I didn't have my faith.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That's exactly the way I have felt in our journey too. And just I really felt God so close to me, and that peace, has surrounded me right after losing our son that I can't even begin to describe. It's just
Mm.
absolutely amazing. I haven't really
And
felt
that's
that
hard for people
such
to
a
believe
deep
too,
grief
right?
that. Yeah, yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah.
but it's true.
And so I feel. Mhm. So even right in the middle of it, even though I'm like, it just was crazy, maybe seems senseless. I mean, I just felt God, and I'm like, God, you're here with us. You see us, you know all of this, you love us, you've never left us, and I've just quoted because I knew I could feel that, and I knew that to be true from as much as
Yeah,
I've been in the Word anyway of God's promises. But
yeah,
I definitely felt that, and so
yeah.
yeah, amazing. Um, so can I ask what is your biggest things that you really like to share with women, like something else that you would like to share here to someone that is walking through that and maybe just really struggling. They haven't really been able to see that brighter side yet.
Mm. Well, I would say not to do the journey alone. I think I think it's very natural to want to isolate, and I remember myself, like when somebody knocked on the door, it was like, "Oh, just leave me alone." And they wouldn't, thank God.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Okay.
don't like let people in. Let community support you. Open your keep your heart open because it can destroy you. Grief can destroy you, and
Mhm.
yet it can reshape you too, and if you allow it. And and I couldn't have seen this before when I was in it, but I can see how grief was such a beautiful, beautiful journey for me. And so
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
you allow yourself to be in it, it will shape you and it can be beautiful and so many beautiful things can come out of it if you allow it. So that would be the number one thing. Yeah. Learn who your people are too. Like, there's three categories of people. There's people who, when you share with them, you feel worse, or when you share with them, you're like nothing changes. And then when you
Yeah,
share with them, you feel better. Get
yeah.
to know and
Okay.
categorize those people so that you know the
Yeah,
level of sharing that you can do with certain people. I'm not saying don't be with those people that make you feel worse. Just pick and choose the topics that you're going to talk about and
yeah,
protect your vulnerability to the people who can handle it and who can
yeah.
support you.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. That's really good. Yeah. I noticed that in mine. Yeah, there was certain people that you just didn't go very far, share too much because they just, like I said, kind of couldn't handle it. And then there's others that you really could open up to them and they really understood you. It
Yeah.
was safe to share those things. So, oh, okay. Oh, that's
And I think we need all three groups too, like there's some people that I would get together with and it would never come up. And sometimes you need a break from that, So it's like you
okay.
don't always
Okay.
have to be
Yeah.
talking about it. So
Yeah.
so don't disqualify people from your life. Just be protective with your heart, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really good advice. Yeah, and so you do the speaking and coaching. So you want to share where people that's listening could kind of get in touch with you, get a hold of you, and how you can help them.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, my website is www.adaptdna.com. And there are free downloads there. There's free resources. Excuse me, sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and you can set up a free call with me. I'd be happy to have a call and just, see where you're at and see how I can support you. I have little surveys to detect what your grieving style is, and then you can have a call with me and I can show you how your grieving style, how to navigate the best way through your different grieving styles. So all kinds of resources on the website, and I'm happy to
Okay.
support in any way I can.
Okay, that sounds really good. Wow. I like that. And yeah, I'll have your links and stuff in the description here where they can find you. But that sounds really helpful and really,
Great.
really needed. What we need to get through this as part of the community. Like you're saying, they need a community. You can be part of their community as they move forward and try to kind of make sense of what they're going through and their grief and to talk to someone that's been there and knows how they feel and gets it and understands that safe place, a safe person. So
Yeah,
that's good.
I have a public page on Facebook that you can follow with
Okay.
videos and different resources as well, and a private group too. So yeah, when you mention community there, you can definitely find me on Facebook. So facebook.com/, my good grief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my good grief is the kind of the name of your
That's the grief program that
what
I
you do
run.
your program.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
I do mental health
Yeah.
facilitation as well. So Adapt DNA is just kind of the umbrella over
Yeah.
everything. Because at the end
Oh,
of the
okay.
day, it's all about being adaptable to your
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Okay. Well, I think that's probably about it. I've sure enjoyed having you on here, Cheryl, all that you shared and sharing with us about your daughter, Rachel, and just how she's been able to help a lot of people and
Yeah.
her donor.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, that's amazing. And how you've walked through that and now are helping others. So just
Thank you
thank you so
so
much for
much.
all that you've shared with us.
You're very welcome.
Okay. 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 Well, take care.
Bye
God
bye.
bless. Bye.